The US President Trump wrote The Art of the Deal, but judging by the outcome of the Iran war, he may never have understood the art of war. The conflict was launched without a clear long-term strategy, without the kind of calculations and preparations Sun Tzu demanded in the very first chapter of his book. More than 2,500 years ago, Sun Tzu warned that victory is decided before a war begins. Yet today, many people quote Sun Tzu, but very few have ever taken the time to truly study what he wrote. They know the famous lines. Know your enemy. All warfare is based on deception. But they don't know the context, the reasoning, or the philosophy behind them. In fact, even many Chinese people misunderstand what Sun Tzu was really trying to teach. So in this series, we'll go back to the source. Using both the original Chinese text and Lionel Giles' classic 1910 English translation, we'll explore the art of war chapter by chapter, not just what Sun Tzu wrote, but what he meant. Welcome to The Way and the War. For many people who have never read The Art of War, the English title itself can be misleading. At first glance, they might assume it is a book of military history, a collection of war stories, or perhaps a practical guide that teaches people how to fight battles. But it is none of those. The Art of War is not a military training manual. It does not teach soldiers how to train, how to use weapons, or what actions they should take during combat. Instead, it is a work of military theory. Everything in the book is concerned with military strategy, as well as the tactics used in campaigns and battles. Imagine war as an incredibly complex game, one where nations, economies, and millions of lives are at stake. The Art of War is not a guide to playing the game. It is the rule book that explains how the game itself works. It asks and answers the fundamental questions. What is war? What are the fundamental principles of war? How should a war be organized? And what must be considered before and during a war? Before we begin interpreting Sun Tzu's ideas, there are 5 important concepts that we need to understand first: war, campaign, battle, strategy, and tactics. These 5 concepts are essential because Sun Tzu uses them with great precision. Throughout this series, we will use the same definitions consistently. Without first understanding the differences between these terms, it becomes very easy to misunderstand what Sun Tzu is actually discussing. War is a large-scale, organized armed conflict between major groups, usually states or nations, fought to achieve political, economic, territorial, or other strategic objectives. War is merely the continuation of policy by other means. Every war is fought with a strategic purpose. War is the highest level of military activity. A single war is usually made up of multiple campaigns. A campaign is a large-scale military operation conducted within a particular theater or region in order to achieve a strategic objective. A campaign consists of a series of related battles, connected by a common objective across time and geography. A battle is the basic unit of direct combat between military forces. Battles are usually fought within a limited area and over a relatively short period of time. Examples include the defense of a bridge, the capture of a hill, or the assault on a fortified position. Strategy is the overall plan that directs an entire war. It is formulated according to a nation's political objectives and determines how a war should be prepared, organized, and conducted at the highest level. Strategy answers one fundamental question: where are we trying to go? Its purpose is to determine the correct direction, or simply doing the right thing. Because strategy determines the overall direction of a war, it cannot and should not be changed casually. Tactics are the specific methods and actions employed during campaigns and battles in order to achieve strategic objectives. Tactics answer a different question: how do we get there? Their purpose is to execute the strategy successfully, or simply doing things right. Unlike strategy, tactics must remain flexible. They should constantly adapt to changing circumstances on the battlefield. In shorts, strategy determines the direction. Tactics serve the strategy. Once these 5 concepts are clear, we can begin to see the overall structure of the art of war. The book consists of 13 chapters. Each chapter focuses on a different central theme. Taken together, the 13 chapters follow a clear progression, from war and strategy at the highest level to campaigns and finally to battles. This structure is deliberate. Sun Tzu begins with the broadest level of thinking, before gradually moving toward the practical realities of military operations. Throughout history, most people have had little direct experience with war, and many have had little interest in studying it. Yet the art of war has been read and studied across the world for more than 2,000 years. Its influence extends far beyond the military. It has earned the respect not only of military professionals, but also of people from many other fields. Sun Tzu's ideas have been studied by American generals, British military strategists, Japanese business leaders, Wall Street investors, and even championship coaches. Very few books have remained influential across so many cultures, professions, and centuries. So why has a book about war continued to matter for more than 2,500 years? The answer is actually quite simple. War is the most intense and comprehensive form of organized human activity. It involves enormous numbers of people, affects entire societies, and places politics, economics, leadership, technology, logistics, and human psychology under the greatest possible pressure. For that reason, the principles that govern war often reveal patterns that can also be found in many other forms of human competition. Large-scale activities such as politics, business, and professional careers all involve competition. So do smaller-scale activities such as games, chess, and many of the challenges we face throughout our own lives. Wherever people compete, strategic thinking becomes relevant. That is why people from so many different professions continue to study the art of war. The Art of War was written during China's spring and autumn period. I won't spend too much time discussing the historical background here. For now, it is enough to know that it was an era of prolonged conflict between numerous rival states, a period of almost continuous warfare that lasted for centuries. Most military writings of that time also discussed political institutions, morality, ethics, or systems of government. The art of war is different. Sun Tzu deliberately set those subjects aside. Instead, he focused almost entirely on one subject: war itself. To Sun Tzu, war was not primarily a question of morality or ideology. It was a problem that could be studied, analyzed, and understood. In that sense, the art of war is best understood as a conceptual manual, a book that explains how war works. As we just discussed, war is the most intense form of organized human activity. Every important human achievement, whether in leadership, organization, technology, logistics, intelligence, or decision-making, is ultimately tested under the extreme conditions of war. Ideas that are vague, superstitious, or detached from reality simply do not survive such tests. Luck may influence a single battle. It may even affect an individual campaign. But over the course of a long war, especially one that lasts for years or even generations, luck becomes far less important. What ultimately survives are principles that reflect something more fundamental. This is one of the main reasons why so many of Sun Tzu's ideas remain relevant today. They were not built upon temporary circumstances. They were refined through one of the most demanding environments in human history. That is also why many of the principles found in the art of war continue to be meaningful, not only in military studies, but also whenever people seek to understand the nature of strategy itself. Now that we have established the historical background and the overall framework, we can finally return to the original text itself. You may be wondering why we've spent so much time on the historical background and the overall framework. The reason is simple. If we truly want to understand the art of war, this foundation is absolutely essential. Let's begin with the first chapter of The Art of War, Laying Plans. The opening sentence was translated by Lionel Giles as follows: "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected." At first glance, the meaning seems straightforward. Sun Tzu begins by telling us that war is vitally important to the state. Its outcome can determine whether a nation survives or falls into ruin. But to fully understand this sentence, we need to look beyond the English translation and return to what Sun Tzu was actually trying to express. In Sun Tzu's view, war was never an isolated event. It was the continuation of politics, when political objectives could no longer be achieved through other means. For that reason, the success or failure of a war could determine the prosperity, stability, and even the survival of a state. This idea may sound familiar to modern readers, because more than 2,000 years later, Karl von Clausewitz famously wrote that, "War is merely the continuation of policy by other means." Although Sun Tzu and Clausewitz lived in completely different civilizations and nearly 2,000 years apart, both recognized that war exists to serve political objectives rather than replace them. However, Sun Tzu takes the discussion one step further. His point is not simply that war serves politics. His point is that war should be the last resort. Why the last resort? Because once a nation reaches the point where it must rely on war, the stakes have become extraordinarily high. If even war fails to achieve the political objective, then the entire political situation may begin to collapse. The prosperity, security, and future of the state could all be placed at risk. This is why Sun Tzu begins the art of war, not by teaching people how to fight, but by explaining why the decision to fight must never be taken lightly. Let's consider a recent example. Think about the recent conflict involving Iran. Before resorting to war, were there other political, diplomatic, or economic options that might have been used to pursue the same objectives? I won't answer that question here. Instead, I'd like to leave it to you. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Sun Tzu then introduces one of the most important ideas in the entire book: the 5 fundamental factors and the 7 strategic comparisons. Before making the decision to wage war, a ruler and his commanders should evaluate these 12 elements as carefully as possible. Only after this assessment should they decide whether war ought to begin. This process is what Sun Tzu calls temple calculations. For Sun Tzu, temple calculations do not refer to religion or superstition. They represent a careful process of strategic assessment carried out before a war begins. The 5 fundamental factors are Tao, the moral law; Tian, heaven; Di, earth; Jiang, the commander; Fa, method and discipline. Let's examine them one by one. The first factor, Tao, is translated by Lionel Giles as the moral law. The original Chinese, however, uses a single character, Tao. If you have some familiarity with Chinese philosophy, you may immediately recognize this word from Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. However, although the same character is used, it does not carry exactly the same meaning here. Lionel Giles's translation, the moral law, captures part of Sun Tzu's meaning, but not all of it. In this context, Tao is not simply about morality. It also includes political legitimacy, public support, and the unity between the ruler and the people. Sun Tzu writes, Dao zhe, ling min yu shang tong yi ye, gu ke yi yu zhi si, ke yi yu zhi sheng, bu wei wei. Lionel Giles translated it as, the moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger. Overall, this is an excellent translation. However, the original Chinese text contains one idea that is easy to overlook. The phrase Tong Yi does not simply mean obedience. It means that the people and those who govern them genuinely share the same purpose and the same political will. Only under those conditions will people willingly face life and death together with their leaders. For Sun Tzu, this requires at least two conditions. First, those in positions of leadership must themselves be united. Second, the government must enjoy the genuine support of its people. Only when both conditions are met can true Tao be established. The second factor is heaven. In Sun Tzu's context, heaven does not refer to religion or divine intervention. Instead, it refers to natural conditions beyond human control. As Lionel Giles explains, these include night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. In modern language, we could simply describe this as climate, weather, and seasonal conditions. The third factor is earth. At first glance, the translation seems straightforward. However, the original Chinese character di carries a slightly broader meaning. It certainly refers to geography, mountains, rivers, distances, and terrain. But in Chinese, the same character also appears in many expressions that describe one's position or circumstances. For that reason, Earth should not be understood as geography alone. It also includes the overall battlefield situation created by that geography. In other words, Sun Tzu is asking commanders to understand not only where they are fighting, but also what kind of military situation that terrain creates. The fourth fundamental factor is the commander. According to Sun Tzu, a commander should possess 5 essential qualities: Zhi wisdom, Xin trustworthiness, Ren benevolence, Yong courage, and Yan strictness. Lionel Giles translated them as wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. Overall, this translation is both accurate and highly readable. However, just as we saw with Tao, several of these Chinese characters carry meanings that are broader than any single English word can fully express. Let's look at them one by one. Sun Tzu places wisdom first, not courage, not determination, not military experience. Wisdom comes before everything else. This ordering is significant. It tells us that, in Sun Tzu's view, the intelligence and judgment of a commander are more important than personal bravery. A courageous commander may win individual battles. A wise commander is capable of winning an entire war. The order of these qualities is therefore not accidental. It reflects Sun Tzu's priorities. The second is Xin. Lionel Giles translated Xin as sincerity. This translation is understandable because from one perspective, Xin can indeed refer to a commander's sincerity and loyalty toward the ruler he serves. However, in the broader context of Sun Tzu's discussion, Xin also carries another equally important meaning. It means being trustworthy, keeping one's promises, and maintaining credibility. If sincerity describes a commander's relationship with his ruler, then trustworthiness describes his relationship with his officers and soldiers. For a military commander, trust is not built through words alone. It is built through consistent actions. Rewards should be delivered as promised. Punishments should be carried out fairly. Orders should be reliable. Only when soldiers trust their commander will they be willing to follow that commander into danger. For this reason, I believe trustworthiness reflects Sun Tzu's original meaning more completely than sincerity alone. The third quality is benevolence. Here, Sun Tzu places benevolence before strictness. That order is worth noticing. It suggests that a commander earns the loyalty and support of soldiers not only through discipline, but also through genuine care for those under his command. However, benevolence alone is not enough. Compassion without discipline cannot sustain an army. That is why strictness appears later in the list. The two qualities are intended to balance one another. The fourth quality is courage. A commander who lacks courage cannot expect courage from the soldiers under his command. In moments of uncertainty and danger, the commander's own example becomes part of the army's morale. For Sun Tzu, courage is therefore indispensable. But it is not placed above wisdom. Courage without wisdom easily becomes recklessness. The final quality is strictness. This does not simply mean being harsh toward others. It also means maintaining high standards for oneself. A commander should lead by example. Discipline begins with the person giving the orders. Only then can discipline be expected from everyone else. The fifth fundamental factor is method and discipline. In the original Chinese, Sun Tzu writes, "Fa." Lionel Giles translated it as method and discipline, and I believe this is an excellent translation. Unlike some of the previous terms, method and discipline capture Sun Tzu's meaning remarkably well. Here, Fa refers to the entire organizational system of an army. It includes its chain of command, military organization, discipline, the assignment of responsibilities, training, logistics, and the management of weapons and military supplies. In other words, Fa is the system that allows an army to function efficiently. Without such a system, even the most capable commander would struggle to lead an effective army. Now that we have examined all 5 factors individually, we can better understand what Sun Tzu was trying to achieve. According to Sun Tzu, a commander must have a thorough understanding of all 5. If any one of them is neglected, the chances of victory are greatly reduced. Notice something interesting? Although the famous phrase, "Know yourself and know your enemy," does not appear until later in the art of war, the idea itself has already begun to emerge here. Before comparing yourself with your enemy, you must first understand yourself. That begins with understanding these 5 fundamental factors. Only by knowing the true condition of your own side can you make a meaningful comparison with your opponent. This is the first step toward what Sun Tzu would later describe as, "Know yourself and know your enemy." All right, that concludes today's discussion. In this episode, we examined the historical background of the art of war, its overall framework, and the first of Sun Tzu's key concepts in the chapter Laying Plans, the 5 fundamental factors. In the next episode, we will continue with the 7 strategic comparisons and finish the rest of the Laying Plans chapter. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.